Well, I think we might get started. Hey, it's just after 2. I know there'll be people joining us as we go. I think I know everybody, but for those that I don't, my name is Pete Griffiths. I'm the CEO of the Australian Cancer Association, and I'd like to kick this webinar off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various parts of the country from which we're gathered here today, and by paying my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. If you are new to the Australian Cancer Association, when we're not busy advocating on behalf of camps in a COVID environment, we're normally working to get any group from any background access to a great camp or lead outdoor activity, and also, of course, help our members and everybody else who can help in the sector to deliver a great program for those groups. We are recording this session, and I'm sure everyone's well across Zoom nowadays, but if you don't want to have your face captured at some point, just make sure you turn your camera off. There's plenty of space during the conversation for questions, but you can also use the chat function to record questions, and Jess will moderate them through the course of the afternoon. I want to welcome, I think we've got 4 of our board members here today. We've got Luke from South Australia, we've got Ange and Amanda from Victoria, and we've also got Graham from Western Australia from our board joining us. That's great. And also want to say hello to Laurie from Outdoors New South Wales and Mark from the Queensland Outdoor Recreation Federation. Now, many of you will have come across Sonia before. She's done a number of things with us over the last couple of years. And she was at the last conference in Queensland. She's done a few other workshops for us on managing the media in a crisis. And given we are in some parts of the country now back at work and camps are fully functioning, and for those that aren't, we hope we soon will be, I guess it's really only a matter of time before we have either an outbreak of COVID or something similar at one of our camps around the place. We all know, of course, that we're not going to have outbreak start at a camp. It's going to be imported to a camp, but we're quite clear that the media will see it as an outbreak in a camp. So Sonia's going to give us some tips on how to manage the messaging, how to stay in control of the conversation, I guess, to some extent, Sonia, and how not to get more stressing than you need to be, given you're probably already going to be pretty stressed already. So having said all that, I'd like to introduce Sonia Zawetsky and hand over.
Thanks, Pete. Hello, everyone. I can see a few of you. There will be plenty of times for questions at the end, because most of the times I've worked with ACA, the questions are where we really get to work through individual issues. So what I thought I'd do is just run through some key principles at the outset, and then look at preparing messaging, because for those of you fortunate enough to be operating camps, or hopefully when the rest of you are able to, as Pete said, if there is an outbreak, we want as much of the media work and the stakeholder communication work done beforehand. So we'll spend a bit more time looking at what that messaging should look like and what it should not look like, and then a little bit about actually dealing with the media. If they ring, if they're on the phone, who to prioritise, etc. And as I said, we'll do some questions and troubleshooting at the end. So my background has nothing to do with outdoor education. It's, well, apart from that's where I spent some of my misspent youth. My background is predominantly as a journalist, the early years with the ABC around the various locations, and since then running this business, helping people deal with their media and their communication. And the notes that we go through today, after this presentation, I will add anything that has come up in questions, and then I'll send across to Jess and Pete a copy. So there's no need to take notes. I will make that available to you. And then please feel free to contact me afterwards if there's any follow-up questions or something that I didn't cover that's pertinent to you. I'm very happy to take those on board. Oh, and the very first thing I did, and we knocked us out of share screen. So as I said, let's have a look at what to do, how to get prepared, how to deal with, God forbid, if you do end up doing an interview on a COVID related incident, how to keep all of that good preparation at hand and not let the journalist start to lead you down a very negative path. But let's start with why we would deal with the media, because it's very easy when you are dealing with an incident, you've got possibly hysterical parents, regulators, schools, etc., it's very easy, especially at the outset, to just sort of lock the gate, push them away and not reply to the media. So let's just have a little, I suppose, frame it up. We don't want to add more pain onto a difficult situation as it is. We don't talk to journalists because they're lovely people and we want to fully inform them. It really is about protecting your reputation. And what does that look like? It's demonstrating your brand promise. If I went to the ACA website, all of your individual camp websites, I'm sure there'd be something there under all of them about one of your key values would be looking after people and caring. So when our reputation is under attack with an incident like this or any other incident, it really is about demonstrating, when the rubber hits the road, the brand promise that we make. So all the way through, when we're deciding what to do with media, how quickly do I need to respond, what do I need to say, it's really all about demonstrating that we care, demonstrating that we are compliant, that we have operated this camp, this retreat, this particular event within guidelines, and that we are in control of this event. We mightn't be in control of an outbreak, but we're in control of how we are handling it. And those are the sort of the three areas where people can often come unstuck. So I think it just bears thinking, and in your minds, especially for those of you that aren't able to run camps at the moment, what is at stake for us? And, you know, all of us that are in business are looking at the future of the business, but it really is about reinforcing who we are and what we promise. So let's just step into the shoes of the media and look at what role a story like this, what role you play and the lens through which the media looks at, because yours won't be a new story. COVID, unfortunately, is no longer a new story. It's been with us in some way for most of the year. What the journos will look at the very outset when they get word that there is an outbreak, or that there might be an outbreak, or that there's an incident. So if it's not confirmed, but if it's rumour, then they're looking for the impact. First, they want confirmed what's happened. Has there been an outbreak? Is it at a camp? Is it at a school? And those logistical issues. And then all of the coverage around this starts to focus on what is the impact. So it starts with the logistics of the camp. How many people? Are they kids? Are they elderly? Are they disabled? Where are they? How badly are they affected? Are they in hospital? Has it happened post? What's happening? Is the camp closed? Is it open? Etc. Then is there impact on industry? Down the track, we look at, oh, okay, well, if you did something bad or if you didn't comply with regulations, is there a role here for regulators? Is Dan Andrews, if it's Victoria, going to comment? Is the Chief Medical Officer going to make a comment? Are regulators going to be asked to step in and change things, either how camps happen or something more broadly about the movement of the community? So that's sort of the impact hierarchy that we would go through. The same with any other story, but we're always looking for that wider community fallout now from every iteration of a COVID story. Oh, Camp X in South Australia has had an incident. Does that mean camps at Christmas are going to be closed down everywhere? And then when these things overlay, as in Queensland with state elections coming up, that's why we look at the wider community or broader fallout. COVID is a topical story. It's the biggest story in town at the moment. We look at each story through the lens of impact and what else is topical and timely. So if there was, say, an outbreak in a Victorian camp just after Victoria had finally opened up again, then we look at that. Or is this going to send Victoria into phase 3 lockdown? If there's a series of events, what about the economic impact? Is this going to mean that camps are going to have to start closing their door, or outdoor locations are not going to be financially viable? You know, we might even track, if we're on to you for the COVID incident, then we might start asking the JobKeeper question. So it's what are the topical nature of questions. If there's a lot of focus on schools, large gatherings, then we've got a bigger lens on camps and outdoor activities. And we always love a good conflict angle. Is what you're saying, what you're doing, how you're doing it in conflict with advice? Does someone from another area say, well, look, the problem with this camp is only the teachers had masks, not the kids, or something like that? Are there conflicting views by prominent names and players in this area about what should have happened? What we don't want is conflict within your organisation and association on how things should have been done. Oh, but hang on, the association says that the regulations were that everyone wears a mask, but this camp said, no, our policy in our state says you only need a mask if you're doing food prep or indoors. So that we don't want any conflict around those, because then that control piece and compliance starts to be questioned. The media is obsessed with est factors, and you don't want to be one of the est factors. Very technical term for those that I haven't worked with before. Are you the first camp to be closed down? Is this the worst example of a breach of protocols? Is this the biggest number of elderly people affected, etc., etc.? You want to avoid worst and possibly first, unless you're the first camp post-lockdown to happen successfully. Then that's a positive story, and we're in a whole different realm, because that signals a bit of hopefully return to normal and we're open for business. In the COVID framework, you don't want to be worst, last, those sorts of things, or the first camp to, you know, muck things up for everyone else. In terms of preparation, for those of you that are not sort of camp ready at the moment, or really looking at are we ready to handle communication, it's one thing to have your COVID safe plans. That absolutely has to be clear. Everyone in the organisation needs to understand what is our process, what are we doing differently, and have that somewhere written up. And I know the association's working in that area as well. Think about all of the contacts that you would have to, this comes under your COVID preparedness, but think in terms of communications as well. You've got all those hotlines, all those people that if you had a reportable incident or if there was an issue, can I contact health 24/7, because you don't operate just Mondays to Fridays, 9 to 5. Do we need to contact emergency services? How would we contact the media if we wanted to do something proactively? Would we be ready for that? Have we briefed our on-site staff to be media ready? What are your expectations of staff? And if it is don't talk to media, what do they do if media turns up? If a Channel 9 crew literally comes to the door, what do you want the person at reception or whoever happens to be walking past to do? What do they actually say, and how do they say it? Do they know what not to do? And what are your expectations of them? Who do they contact? How do they make that contact? And I always think phone calls are better than emails, because they can get lost in the system, especially when we need to move very quickly. Think, who would our spokesperson be? If, God forbid, this did happen and we did decide to put someone up, not just a written statement, as an individual camp as opposed to the association, who is our spokesperson? Are they ready? Are they available? Are they going to be somewhere where they have, you know, mobile range, etc., or internet for Zoom these days? And are they ready and prepared to do that? And ideally, they're not the same person in a small operation who is in charge of taking care of the event, because that's very difficult to do both. You want someone who's very close to that person, working in very close contact, but maybe not the same person if they're already doing a 24/7 job. What are the expectations with your client or the booking client? If it is a school group, have you got principals already? If something happens, you don't name the school, you don't comment, you leave it up to the school. That's going to be tricky, because the school's protecting their reputation, not yours. So hopefully you'll always be in a position where you can comment. If not, I guess that's a role for the association to play. They mightn't be able to comment on this particular incident at this camp. There was an issue, for those of you familiar with the Tangara school situation in New South Wales. Muddy there because it was billed as Tangara. Tangara was very quick to say, actually, that wasn't a school camp. It wasn't a school sanctioned camp. It was an extra activity with an external supplier. So again, knowing what is the expectation from the booking client for you of what you will and won't say. And there's issues there if people are underage, obviously, etc. And have some standby statements ready to go. Don't think, okay, it's media, they're at the door now, I need to really think, what are we going to say? We get a lot of those things pre-prepared, and then we just populate the exact information. We'll look at that in a bit more detail. But just some tactical preparations, thinking where are our sites, if something happened or if a phone call came through, how quickly would it get up to the senior people who can make decisions on what we say, whether we say it, and respond. In terms of that prepared statement, I have rejigged a little bit those of you that have worked with me before, and we look at a general critical incident statement. Through the, again, the lens of COVID, I've tweaked just a little bit the order in what we would go through. The first thing is clarify or confirm what we know. Now, if it's very early on, you might not know much other than 1 or 2 kids that were at the camp have now presented with COVID. You might know, as Pete said, if it came in, happened later, the extent of it. But if you know you've got a notifiable incident or something like that at the outset, you're defining what it is and what it isn't. Confirm what we know. At this stage, what we can confirm is. Then go straight into demonstrating that care and control. What are we doing about it? Don't disappear into what I call sit-rep language. We want some average everyday speak that people can understand. It's perfectly fine to say we have immediately enacted our COVID response plan. That includes. This is where we're also demonstrating care. If we've still got the kids on site or the people on site, what are we physically doing with them? Who are we notifying, etc., etc. A lot of it's going back through contact tracing, cleaning. Then go into what we don't know or what we can't comment on. We're already starting to take control here. At this stage, it's unknown exactly who, patient 0 is, or whether it came from a staff member, a student, those sorts of things, or any elements that the school has asked you to not comment on. At this stage, we're working with the school involved. We won't be naming them or just leave the name out. But the reason we would add the things that we can't comment on at that stage is because we want to, pad out what's going to be a relatively short statement. We're already setting up an expectation with the media that I'm not going to speculate on these following things, but it also says to people that you're thinking about the same things they're thinking about, even if you can't comment on them. And there could be legal reasons why you can't comment. You're not the health department. We're talking about possibly underage kids. You might not know. This could have all happened well or post the event, and there are certain things that at that stage we just don't know. And then we need a last line, a wrap-up line. To manage expectations, is the camp closed for cleaning? Is a review happening? Are we working with health, etc.? Or if we want to give thanks, we just want to thank all of the staff of, St Xavier's College or whoever, if we're allowed to name them, for working with us to quickly isolate the cases or change the location, or, thank, if it's appropriate, the health department for their assistance, those sort of things. Just one line that closes off the statement. And I would be thinking about in normal crisis control, we look at what are the various categories of risk, and we have a little statement ready for each. You might want to think about, for each of the COVID realities, something happens during camp and we have to, isolate everyone, pack them all off and send them home, separate them, send them elsewhere. Then we might want a message prepared for that, what I call a standby statement. If it's a notifiable incident after camp and you've already got another group of people in, we might want to have something for that, because you can imagine the second group in might just want to reaffirm that everything was cleaned or deep cleaned and fogged, etc. It's just a way of doing as much of the work as you possibly can, sharing those resources, because you're going to be in very similar situations, you know, dates, names, schools, and locations might change. But as much of that work as can be done and possibly pre-approved by your board, by your executive, and then you can start to give some of those lines even to on-site staff if they need to just say something to a journalist. Might just be, look, I can't help you at the moment. We're in the process of contact tracing and conducting a deep clean. Something like that. But if you get all the messaging into one place, it does help when the pressure's really on. I just cobbled together there what a little standby statement might look like. Obviously with no actual details, just Camp X, issue X. It doesn't have to be long, but it also needs to be more than a couple of short lines. So if that's useful, that will be in there. And at this point, while we are talking about messaging, I'm just going to ask, are there any particular questions or comments at this stage? Because I've run through a bit of content already.
Yeah, I'll ask a question, Sonia. It often feels like interactions with the media can be combative or defensive. Maybe it's just me. Is there a way of actually making the interaction a bit less stressful itself? You know, so it's not really a matter of at loggerheads with the people who are hammering away or trying to trick your staff or whatever they might be trying to do.
Yes, thanks, Pete. There's a couple of things. One, there's the physical actual stress level of the body. So we look at calming the central nervous system before, you know, generally you take a call from a journo, you see the truck coming down the driveway, and we can go into that heightened nervous state. I would say at that point, focus on an out breath to literally calm yourself. The other thing is try not to focus on the behaviour of the journalists. They are not out to get you. It will feel like that. They can behave very badly. Generally, that's because they're on a deadline. They've got a story. No one is getting in between them, their story, and what their editor told them to be, and their deadline. So if they've got a deadline pressing, they're going to be pushy. They're not going to want to wait. And journalists tend to not do as they are told. So if you can approach dealing with a journalist like you would dealing with a troublesome teenager or a tantruming 2-year-old, whack that smile on your face and don't allow yourself to get into that combative mode. So if the journalist says something that feels very baiting, rather than jump down their throat and say, well, no, that's not the case and I don't know where you get your information from, rather, look, I can understand that line of questioning, but actually nothing could be further from the truth. So you're trying to stay calm, both so that you can respond appropriately, but also so you make the right impression. Because journalists don't have a lot to go on. And if they turn up and the organisation, sure, might be stressed and might have to tell me to wait over there or hang up on me and come back to me. But if all of a sudden you're defensive and you're aggressive, that starts to get me a little bit suspicious. And it also flavours how I would deal with you. So again, as much of this as you've got ready will help. And I think it's good to buddy up. If you're a one-person management operation, then I'm going to dob you in here, Pete. Pull in a Pete or someone else to just run through. Pete, the journo's here. I just need to sort of run through how does that sound great. Have that extra brain, that extra set of eyes and ears to help you with that. And if you can remember, it's intense. They swarm out of nowhere. You're the biggest story in town. All the lights are on you. We think life as we know it is over. And then the next day, a bigger story comes and then they just move on. And nobody even wants you to call them back from the day before. So it feels intense, but it doesn't necessarily last. I hope that gives you some consoling. There's a bit more coming just on that. Oh, why won't it? Sorry, I'm having some. So, oh, sorry, folks. Oh, I'm running backwards, not forwards. Sorry, let me go back to where I wanted to be. So I've just included in here a statement that the Tangara school, it's quite long, but I've put it in there because this wasn't at the early stage when something happened. This was once they had a bit of information and they wanted to clarify some misinformation. So 3 things they wanted to make clear. So that's there if that's of any use to you as well. And you'll see at the bottom, you know, we're just continuing to update. There'll be briefings, etc., etc. And a thank you at the outset to people who had been supportive, because this became a big issue in the New South Wales media, with various people on the radio saying it's a cult, this whole school is some weird religious cult, right through to all sorts of other bizarre things as well. So they battened down the hatches. As far as I could tell, they didn't put a spokesperson up. I think they had a lot of other people doing their speaking for them, but they did have statements. So to Pete's point about how do we engage, you do need to act fast. Media deadlines are about every 20 minutes now. And if they're onto a story, again, if they're television news, they have the deadline looming of an evening and at lunchtime. The print online, every 20 minutes or so, they want an update to a burning story. So that is the act fast, because if you don't fill the void, and I'm from television, I'll try and get those pictures, the video, and now everyone that has an iPhone can provide those to me. So you want to be a player if you're being talked about. The one thing you'll never come back from is lying. So to lie publicly, it's okay to correct something that we thought at the time it was, but it isn't, but try to only confirm what you absolutely know, not what someone has told you. So if a staff member, if you ask them, is it absolutely the case that X happened? And they say, I'm pretty sure it is, I wouldn't be putting my name to that. I wouldn't be confirming that until you're confident you've seen it's been checked off that it's happened. So don't lie. It's very hard to get the reputation back, and don't attack them. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm not saying you won't see appalling behaviour. It's simply a hiding to nothing. And everything you say and do is on the record. There is no such thing as the interview starts now and that wasn't the official spokesperson, you know, that was just the receptionist and she shouldn't have said that. It's too late. Everything that we see in here is part of the story. Something that we can forget, because often when we're going into a crisis response or an incident response, we can get very operational. And that is to speak from the heart and not just the head. What I mean by that is, yes, we're giving detail and information, but think about the emotion that's going on for your stakeholders, for the parents, for the school. What do people at home, you know, what I call just the judge, jury on the couch, what do we expect from you? We expect people that care. We expect people that have some emotional response. And when you actually look at how we're judging all of our chief medical officers around the place at the moment, that comment comes up a lot. Well, they're a bit clinical. Oh no, they seem nice. They seem nice. Nice is good. So we do want you to seem caring and nice. But think about what is it that we're wanting to get across here, that we did the right thing. We want people to feel assured. We want people to feel comfortable, because this is a trust game. No one's going to book you. No one's going to send their kids to you, their oldies, whoever. If there's just that thing, yeah, it sounds like they were doing everything COVID compliant, but I'm just not sure. And that's what we mean when we say speak from the heart. And that also means acknowledging, if the journalist is putting forward some harsh questions around trust, to acknowledge, not accept the premise. We'll look at how to do that, but acknowledge. I can understand people may have concerns, but then we go to positive messaging, but managing risk is what outdoor educators do every single day. So just some logistics. If you are approached over the telephone by the media, remember, as I said, everything is on the record. Take their details, ask them the deadline. That lets them know, okay, this person has some sense that I work to a deadline and hopefully will meet that deadline. And then very politely hang up. I don't mean literally drop the phone, but tell them, great, look, thanks very much for that. I'm not the best person, or I can't help you with that at this point. We'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can, noting your deadline. Thanks, bye. Get rid of them as quickly as you can. And I always say, as soon as you take a call from a journo, get a pen and paper and start writing. Even just their name, key things they've said. Then when you look back at that, oh, it's obvious they've spoken to X. It'll be obvious they've got the information from health. Or I've no idea where they've got this, it's not out yet. They must have some inside info. If they turn up on site and they are recording either with a TV camera or with a dictaphone, or now the tool of all of the trades, an iPhone, don't put your hand up to the camera, because that's the money shot. We're very happy to walk away with this from CampX today. Yes, they're probably trespassing on private property and all of those things, but I wouldn't demand that they stop filming. I would very politely go up, shake their hand, introduce yourself, do all the human things that journalists don't tend to do, and just ask them very politely, look, would you mind right now, we do have kids or we do have some vulnerable people on site, if I could ask you to stop filming and just wait over there while I get our CEO for you or the camp director for you. Much better than demanding things, because then that conflict will become the story. Attend to them in pairs. So one of you's listening, one of you's responding. If one of you doesn't pick something up, the other one picks it up. And also just to babysit them if they're on site. I'm going to leave Jess with you here. She'll look after anything you might need, bathroom, water, etc., while I go over and deal with the camp, the kids on the bus, or find the appropriate person for you, because you don't want to leave them unsupervised if they are on site or within sight. Often they're smart enough to be on public property with a long lens rather than come barreling in onto your property. And to Pete's point earlier, just remind yourself, stay calm. That focused exhale, the longer exhale on the breath, that physically enables enough oxygen to get into the brain and the blood cells so that you can do the high order thinking that's going to be required to both handle the incident but also to make a good impression in the media. Anyone who saw the shenanigans in New South Wales late last week with John Barilaro, the head of the National Party here, whatever you think of koalas, I think we all love them, but that was a bit of a brain snap moment when he came out one day and said, that's it, we've spat the dummy, we're leaving the sandpit, we're not going to be supporting the government. If you have a look at the footage of him, he clearly has lost control of his emotional register. He wasn't even aware that he wasn't finishing sentences, he wasn't speaking properly, he was half speaking like a lawyer, half speaking like a farmer. You could see here that he was just flustered and not in control. And that demonstrated itself, I think, in actions as well. So the breathing, I know it might sound a bit silly, but that really does help us to maintain control. When I was thinking through the media outlets that you might get, because it can sort of feel like a bit of a barrage and we tend to treat them all sometimes as a bit of a grab bag, but there are some that are more worthy of attention, either because we're going to get a friendlier, more sympathetic go, or simply because they affect more people, regulators, and therefore reputation. I would suggest television news, if it's onto you or involved, would be a priority, because if they've already designated a crew, it means they want pictures and they'll get them from somewhere. So we would much rather have your voice, your statements in those stories. And I would include in that saying yes to the project. I'd absolutely say no to a current affair and some of that, you know, the tabloid trashy TV. Apologies if that's your favourite program, but the project, I think, is one lends itself to target audience, and you're going to be much more likely to get a more positive, balanced story. Then the major metro newspapers and online. Again, it's usually tempting to speak to our local journo because they're nicer to us, but just to be sort of brutal in terms of reach and who can do you damage, it's the major metropolitan, you know, the News Limited, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, etc., Adelaide Advertiser. They're the ones that have the most unfortunately, ability to do damage. They're the ones that regulators, politicians, etc., will look at what's being said in those papers and respond to them. Radio is very useful if the story's gotten away, or you wake up and you read the paper and it's full of misinformation and it's incorrect. Then radio is a good place to go with a presenter who's, not one of the hideous right-wing shock jocks that we suffer here in the New South Wales media. Often your local ABC, or someone a little bit more, I guess, less hysterical, where you can go, put forward a good impression and correct misinformation quickly, because we want to be a spoke in the wheel when something is incorrect, when they're talking about the camp, the incident, how it was controlled, dates, procedures you followed. And radio is also, we get a bit of a feel for who the person is, not just the name of the camp, but who is, okay, that person sounds nice, and it's easier for you as a spokesperson to keep it all together, to make a good impression, to not get baited when you don't have a dirty, great big camera in your face, or even these days doing TV via Zoom. For most people, radio is just more palatable and easier. Any journalist who contacts you claiming to have exclusive information, vision, footage, those sort of things, I would take that seriously, because they're definitely doing the story and you don't know what they have. So I think wherever they come from, other than the hierarchy there's someone we need to worry about. When we take control of an incident, what it's all about with what you say, what you do, the impression you make, it's demonstrate that we are reasonable. Something bad happened, you had a COVID outbreak, but you didn't create the disease, you haven't created or incubated it there. So we need to make sure that what we're doing comes across as reasonable. We've talked about remaining calm. Another key point is don't be led and repeat the negative words that the journalists will often use. We will use inflammatory language. Haven't you put lives at risk? Wasn't this dangerous anyway? Haven't you, done something really stupid? What we're wanting is for you to say, oh no, we haven't put lives at risk. Great, we take that comment and we say Camp X denies claims that they've put lives at risk following, an incident X and Y. Ignore the negative, make your positive statement. Outdoor educators deal with risk all the time. This is no different. What we've done is follow the guidelines. Ignore the baiting in the question. Start with your prepared statement, your lines, your positive lines, regardless of what the question is. I'm going to show you a little technique for that. And at all costs, at all time, we avoid commenting on speculation. That just means they're trying to beat the story up. You were lucky in this case, weren't you, Pete? You only had 12 kids. This could have been a disaster if you had, the whole year. Well, look, clearly I'm not commenting on speculation. We are able to do X and Y. And again, we come back with our positive messaging. But as soon as you hear speculation, that's a no-go zone. And we tell them, look, can't be commenting on things that don't exist. How do we do that? We get out of our mindset that I get asked a question and it needs to equal an answer. It's not a court of law. You don't want to do what politicians do and bang on about something that doesn't relate to the question. You get asked a question, how do you choose to respond to the issue raised? And that's going to help speak in positive terms. And then if I want to, I can add something else. Even if the question is, surely this incident is going to mean that you're possibly going to have to, go into lockdown and the business could be at stake. Well, the answer might be yes, because we're all struggling, but we're not going to say that. It would be a real shame if outdoor education was closed down again, given the year that people have had, given how good we know it is for kids' mental health and how clever we are, how good we are at managing all risks. So that's how we decide, you decide, how do I want to respond to the issue? If it's been asked in a negative way, then I come in a very positive tone. And here are some response lines that can help get away from any question to prepared messaging. One of my absolute favourites, whatever the question is, however negatively it's asked, a great way to respond is, look, what I would say to that is, and then you can say whatever you want. And you're going to say, hopefully, something positive around how good you are at managing risk. If they're all about the negative, look, what I would say to that is we also need to remember the benefits of getting kids outdoors, given they've pretty much been indoors for 6 months, even if the question was something hideous with risk and danger and all of those things. You take control at the outset, and if they come in with some narky question, look, I think it's important to say at the outset, again, then we go to our prepared comments and statements. If we do need to correct something that they've said, because most journos get something wrong in a fast breaking story, then the word actually is a good one. And around risk, I can see that working as well. Actually, the evidence clearly shows us way more benefits. Actually, camps are probably one of the safest places you can be because we're closed to the public, we're outdoors a lot, and I don't know, everyone's been temperature tested. If you do have to do something like this, rehearse what you are going to say out loud. I keep talking about the breathing. The breathing is also to help the brain get into that positive state of mind. And if at the time you're hearing a lot of self-talk going on, then try and clear that out. If you can't go into positive self-talk, just tell the little commentary voice in the brain, can't deal with you now, I need to deal with this. Think, what is the hardest question? And rehearse how you will respond to it. And you do all of that before there's a real journalist on the line. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope I've covered everything that you've wanted to cover. I think what I might do now is just open up to questions.
Sonia, there's a question from Jamie in Western Australia on chat. I don't know if you can see that on chat.
Chat, yes, I'm getting into chat. From Jamie, when approached, should you ask what the story angle is that is? Should you ask especially? I wouldn't ask what the story angle is because by the time they're talking to you, the story angle should be clear, and journos don't often like that. So I would sort of maybe, you can ask, yeah, look, can I ask, have you spoken to anyone else on this? I would phrase it more, look, just to make sure I get you all the information, do you want to give me a bit of a sense of what you're after? If it's already clear that there has been a COVID incident, then I wouldn't ask that. Any other questions that I'm not seeing?
Yeah, I think Jodie's got one.
Yeah, before when you said you would be saying no to, say, a current affairs, would there ever be a time when, say, the project and a current affair turn up? Like, how do you obviously approach that and say no to one and yes to the other? Okay, so the project will never turn up. Okay. And so that's the good news about them. They're studio-based unless it's all pre-prepared. They might lift some vision or something that the Channel 10 newsroom has done. Again, a current affair unlikely to turn up. They don't play as part of the pack, but of course they're part of Channel 9, so they might just take vision and footage. But I wouldn't be putting ourselves up for an interview with Tracy Grimshaw on a current affair. Yep. So how do you politely say, how do you politely decline there? So you take the call, lovely, lovely, look, thanks very much, yep, so you want to live with Tracy, etc. Okay, look, let me see what I can do, we'll get back to you. And I probably wouldn't get back to them. Be brutally honest, this is the game that we play. It's different if you're doing a positive story with them, but on a COVID negative story, just the way they work, I would avoid that piece if you can. Most journos are very used to people saying, yep, we'll get back to you, and never hearing back from them. Okay.
Thanks, Sonia. Cole's got a question.
Sorry, Pete, just unmuting there. Yes, Sonia, we'll often have some very controlling school customers in particular. They might have, might be a bit of an exclusive private school or something, and they will often be wanting to take the lead on any incidents. It could be injuries is quite common, and communicating out to people. So there's potential, I guess, for a journalist to divide and conquer and try and get more information by, going down both paths. Any thoughts on managing that situation?
They definitely will, Cole. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. They'll be chasing you for the name of the school if they can't get it, and they will definitely be chasing the school. They will be chasing the school for possibly not to, they're not going to expect that the school is going to dump on the camp, but they will always ask, are you happy with how the school handled it? You know, how the Outdoor Red handled it. You can't stop them going to schools. The great thing is most schools batten down the hatches, don't want to say anything and just put a written statement out. But I wouldn't let that prevent you from protecting your own reputation, even if you're not naming the school. Does that help, Cole, or have I missed something? Okay.
Sonia, I've got a question. Earlier on in the piece, you said you talked about contacting the media. You know, how, I'm not quite sure what that process would be. Would it be through a media release? Would it be through a social media thing, or
so, I mean, I'm not imagining that any of you are going to want to say, okay, we want to let all the media know that we've had an incident, etc. So I'm not thinking you're going to do what we call a blast with a media release. It's probably enough to put it on your own website. And if you want to, you know, tweet it out, do it. If you want to contact particular journalists or a particular media outlet, say somewhere where you know you've got a, you know, a sympathiser, someone who's a supporter, then just think, well, do we have their contact details? Do we know how we would even contact them? The best way to contact journos, individual journalists, is they like it through social if you don't have their email. So, you know, direct message them, those sorts of things. If they're already talking about you on social or getting it wrong, then you might want to do it live. You know, put out a tweet them and say, you know, at Joe Blow, lots of inaccuracies, or, you know, if you want the real lowdown, look at our statement, those sorts of things. If you want to go through, say, to a particular program at the ABC, go through, ring that particular producer, that particular program. But I'm not thinking, Pete, you're going to want to do a big blast through an agency or anything, are you?
No, wouldn't think so.
No, I think that would be if you were doing a bit of a political lobbying campaign or something like that, then you would possibly want to do that.
Just off the topic a little bit, but earlier on you're talking a bit about trying to give a human response and have a bit of heart as well as head. Mm-hmm. Just recently we've seen Palaszczuk talking about border closures in Queensland and stopping people getting across there. To what extent is that an ongoing problem? Or is it just a media cycle issue?
I think it is an ongoing issue. It's interesting when we look at who are the leaders that have performed well in terms of their COVID response versus who they are as a person. And I would say Anastasia Palaszczuk, why she got into a lot of trouble with non-Queenslanders is because she didn't talk from the heart. She talked very much from a political head. When you say things like, well, the Queensland health system is for Queenslanders and the New South Wales health system is for, people in New South Wales. Yep, correct. But where's the empathy? Where's the humanity in that? And then she did it the wrong way. She tried to show she was human by giving us her own story of woe about how she wasn't able to see her own uncle. So I think she was a bit tone deaf on that. Daniel Andrews, well, clearly some things have gone wrong there with quarantine and the COVID response, but listen to how he speaks. My sense is he knows what people in Victoria are feeling, and he speaks to that emotion before he says what the next step is going to be or reiterates why we're doing things.
Okay, and my last question is, since we can't really be sure there's been a COVID outbreak at the time at a camp, because obviously there's a time frame between having a test and the positive test coming out that way. We're going to be responding retrospectively. So is that a matter more of a media release rather than anything else, or is it a matter of one of those blasts?
I think it would probably be even a media release that goes on to, websites, those sort of things, tweeted out through socials. It might also be an opportunity that the association would take to reiterate the importance of outdoor education, because the chances are you're going to be a victim to this. You're not a perpetrator. You know, so if something hasn't gone horribly wrong, all containment measures, you know, you've done everything you've had to do and it's been well managed, then that might form part of your lobbying campaign and the public relations exercise. So there you might want to dip into a project or something and actually ask if they're interested. But I'd be phoning that in and having that conversation.
Great, thanks. I see Graham Sharp, who's one of our board members in Western Australia, has got a question for you on chat.
Just if it all goes bad, is there an exit strategy for an interview? Graham, think more positively. Okay, so the worst thing you can do is wrap the interview up. So what you want to do, you create a moment in the interview where you sort of reorient yourself. And that might be, one, take a breath and stop and use one of those lines. Sonia, look, at this point, I think it's just important to say and have one of those anchor lines that I was talking about earlier around the safety of camps, how good camps that are outdoor eds are at managing risk, because we do it all the time, you know, including infections, food, all of those sorts of things, and the measures that you've gone to. So have a couple of those anchor lines. If what's coming out of your mouth, literally, I can't stop it and I know it's terrible and what on earth do I do? Start coughing. So blah, blah, you know, chief health medical officer's an idiot. Terribly sorry, Pete. Could you ask me that question again? So Graham, I hope there's something in there that's helpful.
Thanks, Sonia. Look, I know folks are sort of soaking this all up. I can sort of see by the way people are paying attention and making notes and so forth. I'm assuming we probably get some questions that are going to be after this forum's over. I hope you'll be happy to take some of those questions later on and we'll be able to address them individually. Yes,
I think I had my contacts up. Otherwise, I'm contactable through you on LinkedIn. Email is just sonia@saveskyconsulting.com or the Facebook page. But yes, very happy as always to do what I can, because it's struggle time for a lot of you, I know, that have been closed for a long time.
Yeah, it's been tough yards, but thanks for your presentation. I know the stuff I'm seeing through the background here, everyone's very happy with how things have gone and really appreciates the effort you've put in. It's also great to have you on board because I know we've had enough contact over the years for you to understand the context in which we work. So if people want to contact you directly, they can of course do so. But for now, I think we'll wrap it up and we'll stay online for the next sort of 5-10 minutes if any more questions come up. But otherwise, feel free to make your way back to what you need to do and we'll catch up with everyone soon.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. All the best.